In light of recent events in Lebanon, I have decided to dedicate today's video to this historic but broken country. A country which has been plagued with corruption since the civil war in the 1970s. A country which has been through wars and foreign invasions. A country stricken with poverty, a recent economic crisis, a pandemic, and now an explosion which rocked the whole of Beirut and has taken many innocent lives. A country whose days seem bleaker as they come, along with no hope. A country with beautiful heritage and history. My country, Lebanon. In the medieval times, Lebanon wasn't as we know it today. It wasn't divided by man-made borders or was part of a wider region or a wider country known as Bilad al-Sham. Now, when you say al-Sham today, it's usually referred to as Damascus, the capital city of Syria. But back then, it encompassed 4 countries, which were Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, and Jordan. And this whole region was known as al-Sham. And this land was the center of power for many empires. In the 7th century, a group known as the Maronites migrated to Lebanon from Syria, and they followed St. John Maron. They settled in the northern mountains, and as you progress into the Middle Ages, you can see this continuing trend of ethnic minorities migrating into Lebanon and settling in different areas. And this can explain the diversity in Lebanon today, and unfortunately the sectarian strife as well. The Shia Muslims of Lebanon migrated in the 11th and 13th century, and they mainly resided in the north and the south of Lebanon. The coastal towns mainly consisted of Sunni Muslims, and this area adopted the Arabic language because you had the Arab empires ruling over it. And there was also the Druze sect, and their founding father came from Egypt. He was known as Ad-Darazi, and they regard it as an offshoot of Shia Islam. So we've just started entering the medieval times in Lebanon, and you already have all of these sects living in that one strip of land. Moving into the Golden Age, Lebanon made notable contributions to the intellectual revolution that occurred at the time, and there were many scholars and thinkers who emerged from that area. There was the physician Rashid ad-Din, the jurist al-Awazi, and the philosopher Qusta ibn Luqa, and they are a few examples we can mention who were scholars in their respective area. The country in the medieval times also experienced an economic boom, in which the harbours of Tripoli and Sur were busy exporting as the ceramic, textile and glass industries flourished. And this is quite the opposite of today, unfortunately. Lebanon is known to mainly import all of its goods, but in the Middle Ages, it was a different story. And the Lebanese products were sought after not only in the Arab countries, but also throughout the whole Mediterranean region. Then we go into the wars of the Crusades, and Lebanon had an important role to play. As we know, the first crusade was proclaimed by Pope Urban, and after taking Jerusalem, the Crusaders then turned their attention to the Lebanese coast. The north of Lebanon became part of the Crusader states, and it was incorporated into the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Beirut and Saida then also fell in 1110, but Sur stubbornly resisted. But then it finally capitulated in 1124 after a long siege and battle took place. And interestingly enough, recently they have found remains in Saida. They say that they are the remains of average soldiers who fought in the region and even mixed with the local population. And the soldiers who fought in the wars of the Crusades also recruited people to fight from Lebanon. You can still see some Western influence in Lebanon up until today. Some ruins and castles have remained, and the strong ties France has with Lebanon. Yes, it was a French colony, but it could be argued that these strong ties started in the Middle Ages during the Crusader Wars. Nevertheless, empires and power struggles continued. So you had the Mongols in the east and the Mamluks who were fighting, but then the Mamluks eventually won, and they then took control of the region and Lebanon. But the early years of Mamluk rule proved to be turbulent, so there was resistance from the Shia Muslims, and they revolted alongside the Druze. However, the Mamluks crushed their revolution, and this meant the Shias had to flee the north to escape massacres, and they fled to the south. And this is why mainly Shia Muslims now reside in the south of Lebanon up until today. And under Mamluk rule, commerce was encouraged, cities like Tripoli flourished, and the people of the interior were left free to manage their own affairs. And the Mamluks ruled up until the Ottomans came, and then they took over the region.